Are you on the verge of burnout or mental health crisis? How can you tell? Well, in today's video, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the signs and symptoms of burnout and recognizing those signs and symptoms early on. So stay tuned. Well, burnout is a state of chronic stress that is typically tied to the work environment. However, it can actually happen in any aspect of your life, not just work. And it leads to physical and emotional exhaustion, feeling cynical about your work or detached from your work, and also feeling like a lack of accomplishment or a sense that you're just not good enough. So the warning signs of burnout can be traced back to the HPA Axis, or hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which I cover in the video that we did on exercise and depression, and I'll make sure to link that somewhere up here and put it in the description for you. Now, the HPA axis is responsible for starting our responses to stress, and it's actually a survival mechanism, and typically will kick off the fight or flight mechanism of our body, where a stressor, like say we're being chased by somebody, it's actually a good thing that our adrenal glands start pumping cortisol to give us the energy to flee. However, in chronic stress or stress that is occurring over a long period of time, this system can actually deregulate and cause dysfunction in multiple areas of our body. And so some of the warning signs that your body is telling you that you are on the verge of burnout or even on the verge of a mental health breakdown are the following. Starting with your cognition. Too much cortisol in the brain is not a good thing. Initially, you may feel alert because you have to flee from that stressor. You maybe have to take a test, so you're alert and you're attentive and your memory may be even on point. However, after time, chronic stress can actually start to impact the memory in a negative way, where now you may have trouble with word finding, or your verbal memory, your vocabulary may not be as expansive as it once was, and you may also have difficulty learning and retaining new information. You may find that you may go to a training at work and you're not even able to pay attention or gather that information and process it to understand what you've just learned. And this sounds a lot like ADHD. So before thinking you have ADHD, ask yourself, could this be burnout? Another effect of burnout is the effect and impact that cortisol has on the amygdala, the fear center of the brain. And this is where it can cause irritability and even anger. So if you find yourself being easily annoyed by others or just being irritated, wanting to be left alone, you could be experiencing burnout. And another symptom would be chronic fatigue. At first, cortisol gives you that burst of energy to flee from the stressor. However, chronic cortisol levels will actually lead to fatigue as the adrenals actually shut down and the brain tells the system and the body to stop producing cortisol. And so in that regards, you can actually have fatigue because your body is just on overdrive all the time and it cannot function in that way. And though you may be feeling fatigued, you may actually have insomnia along with this fatigue because the dysregulation of the cortisol will make it hard for you to fall asleep. Cortisol actually increases first thing in the morning in the response to our circadian rhythm and being awake and alert and starting our day. However, when cortisol is not being regulated or properly controlled in our bodies, due to chronic stress, it can actually lead to insomnia because increased levels of cortisol may be being produced during the night when you're trying to sleep. Some other physical symptoms that can be a result of this chronic stress or burnout are going to be chest discomfort or feeling like your heart is beating too fast, feeling your heart actually beating through your chest, that's called palpitations, or feeling short of breath, or perhaps you're breathing a little bit too shallow, that is all the activation of the stress response and that fight or flight response. And again, you can't be in this mode for too long, because that can lead to headaches, dizziness, and like we mentioned before, fatigue. You may also experience some stomach discomfort. So at first you may feel cramping, a little bit of nausea, and you may even be experiencing diarrhea. However, chronically over time, the gastrointestinal system will actually slow down and you may have constipation. Other changes with your gastrointestinal system or your stomach can actually lead to changes in your appetite. So at first you may have decreased appetite where you're not eating much at all. You may even be skipping meals because you don't really have time to eat when you're fleeing from your stressor. However, long-term production of cortisol and stress on your body can actually lead to stress eating and cravings for things that are high in carbohydrates because your body needs glucose. That glucose production has to come from somewhere, and so you will start craving foods, and most likely junk foods, to help increase your glucose levels, which in the end can lead to weight gain. Another system that gets affected is actually your sex hormones. Think about it. When you're trying to run and flee and you're stressed out and your adrenal glands are pumping and going, cortisol is high, it actually will suppress the sex hormones, and so your libido will be low. So if you all of a sudden start having a lack of sexual desire or lack of interest in your partner, you may be experiencing burnout. And another system that gets affected with the increased stress is the immune system. And so actually what happens is the immune system gets suppressed, which makes you more vulnerable to illnesses. So if you're a person that typically doesn't get sick, and all of a sudden now you're catching a cold or getting the flu, you may be experiencing burnout. And so what if I'm experiencing burnout? Well, burnout and the symptoms of burnout are your body's warning signs that you need to slow down. You see, if you're experiencing all of these symptoms, your body's telling you that you're running on empty and it's time to stop. And what can happen is with this chronic dysregulation of the stress response, you can actually end up developing anxiety, depression, and even psychosis has been linked to chronic stress. So how can you tell if the burnout has led to anxiety or depression? Well, the main factor or the main difference between burnout and having a mental health disorder like anxiety or depression would be if you would take the stressor away from the situation, meaning if you removed yourself from your work environment, if that's the main stressor in your life, and say you went on a vacation for a week and you came back feeling refreshed and rejuvenated and feeling ready to take on the world again, well, then your symptoms were most likely a result of burnout. But if you went on the vacation and you felt like you were detached, you were still having the same symptoms, maybe feeling on edge and stressed and anxious, well, then you most likely have crossed over into having a mental health condition like anxiety or depression, which is when you really want to start talking to your mental health care provider so that they can evaluate you and determine if indeed that is the case. And we made a video going over the symptoms of depression, so if you'd like to review that, I'll make sure to put the video link up here and down in the description. You can also check out our video on how to stay mentally fit, as those tips in that video will actually help you build some resiliency. So, in our next video, we're going to be talking about the things that you can do to decrease burnout and build resiliency against burnout. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out. And if you have any questions about this video, please put that in the comment section below. And if there are other topics you'd like us to cover, please make sure to mention that as well, because we'd like to continue helping you on your mental health care journey. I thank you for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.